Hey runners, welcome back. This right here is my 6 spokes to optimize your training plan. It's the second layer of building a training plan. I've been over how to build and formulate a large training plan from now until race day. And this is the next layer where you want to apply optimization so you're fine tuning that plan to make you a better runner come race day. I use the Cyclic system regardless of who I'm working with, whether it's myself trying to go 2:30 for the marathon, someone trying to squeak under 2 hours for a half, or the pro runners that I'm looking to try and qualify for world championships. It all has the same fundamental aspects when we're building training plans. I use the term 6 spokes because it represents a wheel, and this is a cyclic process. You can start anywhere when analyzing your training. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with number 1, although you can start anywhere. Let's start with the goal and we'll move through from there. When we're applying these 6 spokes, there's kind of a hierarchy of how we apply them, because initially at the foundation phase we have what I'd call like a season, which would for most of us be a build up to like our main event, but for some people you're doing multiple 5k 10k races. Then we have our block, which I'd consider like the base phase, a prep phase, taper phase, something where it's around 3 to 6 weeks really, and we have a specific focus within that block. Then we have our week, I don't know, explain that to you, as is our day. So here I'm just going to focus really on block week day and apply these 6 spokes to that, so that the season, you can have a look at that other video. So for this, let's have a look at what we need to go through when we're looking at a block. So I have a couple guys that are going for the World Championship qualifier for a 104 half marathon in a few weeks, right? So let's just have a look at what we're looking for within a block for those guys. So the block, what have we got, and what is initially, number 1, our goal. And our goals need to be SMART, right? So that is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-based. So we call that number 1. So our goal is SMART. And so what we're trying to achieve in this most recent block is going to be a speed-based threshold development. So these guys need to be running 3-minute Ks. So I think that's like just over 5-minute miles. And what are we trying to achieve there? I already know they can do it, right? They can run 14 minutes for 5K. So then how can I get them to the point where they can run essentially a 15-minute 5K 4 times in a row and then still have a bit of something left to finish? Well, the specific nature of this is that, I've just outlined that we need to up our threshold and our threshold sustainable speed around that 3-minute K. So that is the measurable component. Is this achievable for these guys? Like I said, they're already in that realm of being able to do it. They've ran 104, 105, 106 half marathons before. So yep, that's achievable. Is it relevant? Yes, that's what we're trying to achieve. And time-based is not time-based in terms of like a finish time-based in terms of how long do we have. So for this block, we're going to have 3 weeks just because of the way it kind of fit into our overall schedule. Okay, so we've got our SMART goal. Then the second is time. So I need to look at these guys' schedule to see how much time we have. Miraculously, they're all full-time builders, right? They don't have families, so we have a relatively small window of time available to train. So most of the guys are starting 7:30 a.m., which writes off a lot of pre-work workouts unless we're doing something shorter than 1 hour, because, and this is a great practice I'd love for you guys to do, write out like just a general 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. and just write down everything you have on, including buffer time, and you realize how minimal time you actually have available to train. When you incorporate something like just getting ready and then showering up afterwards, there's not a lot of time. And within here, like if we're getting up at say 6, squeezing in an hour, or maybe getting up at 5:30, squeezing an hour, then you've got travel, breakfast, shower, prep, all that kind of stuff. Where's the recovery if you're going straight into work? That's something that I always think about when we're thinking about time. Like, where is the time to do the workout, and then what does the time look like in terms of our recovery? It's very different if you can run for an hour, then do nothing for an hour. Also, these guys are working physical jobs, so there's almost no recovery. So we've got to look after work, so we're just going anything after 5 p.m. and we're good to go. But I mean, it doesn't allow for, again, a lot of recovery. We've got to kind of work, train, eat, sleep, repeat. But you can't just do that forever. You probably burn out mentally before you burnt out physically. So we need to consider, like, when are we going to incorporate maybe heavy dutier loads of training where there's more time, around the holidays. But for the most part, for a 3-week block, we can train 6 days a week, a couple of hours Saturday, Sunday, so we know we've got that at the weekend. We've got about 60 to 90 minutes after work during the week, and then we want a recovery day. Mondays and Fridays always work pretty well in a schedule for that. And so along these lines of, like, you can't mentally just go forever, we're going to get into number 3, which is the fatigue profile. This is something I don't see incorporated a lot in people's planning. We're always thinking like, oh yeah, I want my fitness to go up, 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 up. And that's the way a lot of these training platforms will measure your training load. It is essentially just the more training you can stack on top of each other over a chronic amount of time, the more load you apply, the fitter you are. So along that, the more tired you get. So we need to think along this block, whether in a week or day, which I'll get into, how are we managing fatigue in this profile? So that's where you can look back on past history. And I know these guys have got 3 weeks at an absolute push of very hard, intensive training. So that fatigue profile pretty much means that we have to be recovering on a Monday and a Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, we can go pretty hard. Friday needs to be chill because Saturday, Sunday ends up being session, long run, as some kind of combination of those, or a race. But the Saturday, Sunday is hard. Wednesday, Thursday is hard, and we've got recovery around that to manage to make sure that we keep enough level of fatigue. Fatigue is important. That overreaching process ensures that we get adaptation as long as we have the recovery. But then after that, we need to make sure that we are coming back down at the end of the block so that we can push up into the next one. So you've got that kind of across the week. Then when we're looking at it in the day kind of fits in with the fatigue profile as how much time did we have available, how much fatigue are we going to have as we get to the end of the week. If we're looking at these guys, full-time builders, Friday's just like a bit of a write-off. It just needs to be absolutely chill as we come into Saturday, the more intensive day where there's more recovery profile, there's more time to exercise, and there's more time to recover. So it's important when we're looking at that even across like a whole block, because you don't want to get to the point where, yeah, you can smash out a week. A lot of people can. Can you smash out the second week and the third week? Because if there's no consistency there, like what I was talking about in one of my previous videos, the ABCs of running PBs, you need that consistency component if you're going to get progression in your running. And that leads me on to that 4th spoke, progression. How are we getting progression within our week or our day or our block? Because it is super important that we think about progression in terms of our fatigue, our time, and our overall goals. So the best way to look at that is the FID principle. So frequency, intensity, and duration. For a lot of you guys, you probably don't have a lot of really high quality data or a professional coach looking over your runs every single day to understand exactly where your fatigue profile sits and where you could apply progression in a way that is going to allow you to get progress in your overall fitness and in your running. So I'd go for progression in a cumulative load state. So what I've talked about previously is that progression can be applied in many different forms, but for the most part, if you just train week on week, your fatigue builds and you're able to get progression in that way, and that you are loading consistently week on week. And so as your fatigue builds, it becomes harder to complete the workouts that were otherwise not too bad on week 1. So that is absolutely the first point where I'd be looking to add progression for a lot of people. Then, like what I've done with these guys, it's kind of pulling that distance lever. The intensity lever and the frequency lever, those are ones that come with higher risk. As we move up that intensity profile, so like a marathon pace all the way up to 5K pace, we increase the amount of force we've got to put on the ground, which means the ground puts more force into our bones, ligaments, tendons, muscles, so we increase our injury risk. If we don't take care of ourselves, if we're unaware of our fatigue, then we apply like more risk into our overall program. So we need to be very careful with intensity. And then frequency is how often are we doing hard sessions, or how often are we running full stop across a week or a month. So frequency has a little less risk if we're just applying, say, an extra 30 minutes on a Monday where we otherwise had a rest. But there are lots of different ways that we can apply progression. In this instance, when we actually get to number 5, we start on that where we're looking at the workout. What is the workout? And then how does it fit into all of these things? So like for these guys, we're trying to run essentially 3-minute Ks for 1 hour, right? Trying to run a half marathon in an hour or thereabouts. So the workouts have been built to first initialize that speed aspect. So like over the summer, we were doing a lot of track racing, so they would get a lot of the speed component, but the overall volume was quite low relative to what they're doing now in terms of like the intensity and duration of distance of these workouts. So as an example, the last block we are on a 10 times 800 meters. So this is at the 3-minute Ks, the ideal goal race pace, which are these guys like just slightly above threshold. But what we're able to do by shortening the distance of the intervals, we're getting 8 Ks at goal pace, but we're actually hitting threshold because we're just going over about 2 minutes, essentially 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off. We're getting good recoveries, good work rates, so we're getting the quality of the speed that we need and the specificity of what we've been, trying to achieve within that block at least, get that speed and try and progress threshold. Whereas now we apply progression based off of like what kind of fatigue we were getting out of this workout, and it's not directly like this, but I mean for simplicity, we're going to 4 or 5 times 2 kilometers. So that's going to be based off of like the fatigue within the workout, the fatigue, across a week due to work and the other training that we've implemented. That's why it's 4 to 5. We can take a lactate reading and see how hard the guys are working on that 4th interval. But what we've got there is we've kept intensities the same, if not slightly lower, because we're going longer. Frequency is the same for the overall like workouts we're doing within a week. Frequency is slightly different if we apply it to the specific day, because instead of doing 10 times 800, we're doing 4 to 5 times 2K. But even if they only did 4 of the times 2K, it's still 8 and 8, but the way it's distributed is obviously different because the distance is coming in a more condensed form. And that leads us into our 6th spoke, and I've said it once, I'll say it again, this is one of the most overlooked components of planning training, and that is getting a long-term bird's eye view of what we are trying to do. So for these guys, like I said, pretty much trying to run a half marathon in an hour, and that's the ultimate season goal. Within the block, we're starting to get to the final stages. We need to get a lot of cumulative time at our goal race pace, or at least there or thereabouts, to see if it's going to be realistic, or we need to make adjustments in the training itself or our race planning and the way we're going to attack the race. So this 6 spokes can be applied again from day to season. So as an example for a day, let's just take our basic aerobic zone 2 run. We have our goal for the run, it's specific, build aerobic base, measurable. We can measure pace power output at our zone 2 heart rate. Is it achievable? Yes, everyone can do zone 2 runs. Is it relevant? Yes, aerobic base is hugely relevant to endurance training. And then is it time based? We've got 60 minutes, 90 minutes, whatever it is. We have our time that we can set and available time within our aerobic run, 60 minutes, got that. Fatigue, great, not going to be that much fatigue, but we could play around with the top and bottom of zone 2. Is there progression? We can get progression within zone 2 with our measurable component, where ideally we could run faster or put more power out for the same heart rate, and so then we're getting load that way, where heart rate's the same, but we're getting more biomechanical load, so we're getting progression that way. Or we could apply a little bit more time to our runs if we have it available. What's the workout? Well, it's just a zone 2 run, right? How's that fit long term? Aerobic base fits long term into anything. So those are the 6 spokes, and we can apply them day, week, block, season. So I highly recommend you check out my initial video on planning a long-term build-up to an event, and then you can apply this 6 spoke process to optimize your training. Once again, thanks for sticking with me. Really appreciate it. Drop the comments if you have any questions, and I'll see you on the next one.